Good afternoon. Welcome back to this is the 35th edition of the live Q&A session. So my name's Chris, I'm a physiotherapist and I'm here to try and help you get started with lifting weights as an older adult. So this is your chance to ask me any questions that you might have. So if you're watching this live on YouTube, then please do use the chat feature. If you're watching this live, if you're watching the recording later on, still leave a comment below and I will get back to that in a future week. I've come prepared with 2 questions today, and then we'll go through any questions that might come in live and go from there. But before we do, I just wanted to start with a bit of an inspiring story, and some of you may well have seen this. So this is Joan MacDonald, so Train with Joan. She's on Instagram. Let me know in the comments if you have heard of her. But so she's not someone I've worked with. She is someone though that she started her journey about the same time as I started Never Talk to Lift, and she's been on my radar and someone I've followed, and her story is kind of the story that I'm trying to help people kind of make that change as well. So it really is amazing, and I've taken a little sort of snippet from her website. So it's trainwithjoanofficial.com is her website, but do check her out on Instagram. But yeah, so this is from her site. So she says, "Hi, my name is Joan MacDonald. I'm 75 years old." I think she's actually about 77 now. I think that was written 2 years ago. 5 years ago, I was 5'3", 198 pounds, and I had a 39-inch waist. I was on medication for high blood pressure and acid reflux. I had terrible edema in my ankles, so that's kind of swelling in the ankles. My arthritis was extremely painful, and I had difficulty walking up and down stairs. I was tired, I was emotional, I was in desperate need of change. Does any of this sound familiar to you? My daughter Michelle was on the verge of, or came up to me on the verge of tears. She said that I had to make a choice. She said if I continue on the path that I would end up even worse and probably on more medication. And as you can see from the pictures there, she has made fantastic progress. I think I read she's now lost about 30 kilograms, feeling healthier, off her blood pressure medication. And not only is she had all those changes, she is now a fitness influencer in her own right. And I just checked today on her Instagram, and that's at Train with Joan, and she's at 1.9 million followers. And she is inspiring a whole sort of, I say generation, but a whole load more people to make similar changes. So if you haven't already checked her out, do go and have a look at her. Probably social media is the easiest one, but I say her website is trainwithjoanofficial.com. I haven't put it in the description yet, but I'll add that into the description once I finish this and go from that there. Let's have a look. So yeah, Maggie says, Joan is a real inspiration. I've watched her story along with the role her daughter played on YouTube. So yeah, it's really nice to see that they are mother and daughter, and it's the daughter is her trainer and initially trained her with a online group, and then has kind of done more from there. But yeah, brilliant story there. Right, so let's have a look. So if I take that away. So first question that I prepared this week was, how can I improve my balance? And now this is something I get quite a lot in the clinic as a physiotherapist. And I had someone else this week came in, not because they wanted to get stronger, not because they're necessarily in pain. They've just noticed their balance is getting worse. They've had a couple of falls. They're worried about causing an injury. And they've been assessed by the doctors for other neurological conditions which we're not worried about. So it's really now, how can I improve my balance? And then when I start working with them, I obviously do some of the balance work, but I also do some strength-based work with them, and they're very confused as to why I'm doing strength, because they feel like they might be wasting time focusing on strength when they just want to do balance. So they'd rather just have more balance exercises. And I just wanted to sort of mention a bit here about how loss of muscle strength is very strongly associated with reduced balance and increased risk of falls. And then you've probably heard me say as well that those who have a fall might be unlucky enough to then sustain a fracture, particularly if it's a hip fracture, that can be quite worrying, because 20% of people over the age of 60 who have a hip fracture within a year will enter long-term care and then not come back out again. So if we can really help with the balance now and reduce those risk of falls and associated injuries down the line, it's going to have a big impact. So we obviously, like I say, do focus on balance exercises as well. And it's a little bit like strengthening. In order to build strength, we need to push the muscles to the point they really struggle, to the point they're at fatigue, and that's where the strength comes. Now, I see a lot of people here with balance exercises are just doing balance exercises that are far too easy for them. They stand on maybe narrow base of support for what used to be sort of 10 seconds, which again, that's a good one to work on then for them, but they get to a point where they can almost manage 2-3 minutes, and they do that for 2-3 minutes. And for me, that's a little bit too easy. It's like for strengthening, you doing 30-40 repetitions, where we really need to get the fatigue point down to 15 repetitions. We do want to get the balance to feel like it is a challenge, because if it's not a challenge, you're not really going to improve the balance. But equally, we don't want to go too adventurous at the balance. Find that you're not safe, you end up having a fall trying to do the thing that's trying to improve it, and then you find that causes an injury. So we need to try and find it's just about challenging enough. We also want to have a look at the environment around us, so we don't want to do anything in a big open room with nothing around you, because if you do start to lose your balance doing the exercise, there's nothing to hold on or support yourself. So kitchen work surface is a good suggestion, because it's solid, it's not going anywhere, particularly if you do it in the corner. So if you kind of look into the corner, you've got a bit coming out to one side and the other side, so if you start to lose your balance to either side, you've got more support as well as going forwards. Depending on how bad the balance is, you could even have a perching stool behind you so that you can sit back to it if you need to. But some of the things you could do is, if standing with your feet at a kind of a hip width apart, you can maintain good balance really easily for well over a minute. Then we can start to go, can we do it to a narrow base of support? Again, if that's too easy, then what we might do is try a tandem stance. So we have kind of one foot in line with the other. So imagine you're kind of on a train track, both are on the same train track, just one ahead of the other, and we can do that the other way around as well. And that way you've got both can help support, whereas the next step up is you go to one foot and then just go on to the other foot. I'd say if you can't even do a second or two, it's too difficult. I say if you can do well over a minute without really kind of being challenged by it, then that's too easy. If even a single leg is too easy, then what you can start to do is do any of those variations. We can try it with the eyes closed, and that then helps challenge you, because you can't use vision to help support your balance. You can also do it on a soft surface like a cushion. You can also start doing quick head motions, which challenges the vestibular system, and that kind of can throw you off balance, and you're trying to teach your body how to react again. So there's some easy kind of balance-based exercises, but the strength ones, again, if you're very new to strengthening and you're worried about balance, you might start building strength in the machines like leg press, knee extension, hamstring curls, and mainly we're focusing lower limb, but we do want to kind of bring the core and the trunk back in as well, and the upper body. But in the leg press machine, you're sitting down, you're supported. If you lose your strength on a rep, you're not going to suddenly fall over and have to kind of manage the load you're carrying as well. So they're a really good start point. But if balance is an issue, it's often worth trying to incorporate a little bit of balance into the strength-based exercises. And what I mean by that is, just rather than leg press, you would stand up and do a squat. And again, you might make sure the environment is safe around us, so that you have a seat behind you, so as you go down, and you struggle, you can then know you've got the safety net of the chair behind to fall back to. But yeah, standing weight bearing exercises like squats, lunges, deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, anything along those varieties are worth incorporating. And it doesn't have to be particularly heavy to begin with, but we can build the weight. But if you're standing up and you're having slight leaning forwards, backwards, your muscles, whilst trying to lift a load, are also having to dynamically adapt and change and keep your balance in one position. So the big takeaway for me is don't dismiss strength because your primary goal is how to improve your balance. You do want to focus on balance based exercises, what you think looks like a balanced exercise, but strength based exercises, particularly the standing ones with a free weight, are still very much balance exercises as well as strength exercises. And if you're avoiding it all through fear of falling, then the weaker you get and the more weaker you condition, remember, a loss of muscle strength is very strongly associated with increased risk of falls. So it's all about finding the mix right, which kind of brings me on to the next question in a second. But for the moment, I think we've kind of covered balance enough there. I do have one more question I've prepared. I would love to answer any more if you've got any questions for me. So if you are watching this live, then please do leave a comment or use the chat feature. For anyone who is watching who is interested in getting started with strength training, then I've got a free ebook that you can have a look at that help guide you through that whole process. That's nevertooldtolift.com/start-here, and that link is in the description below. But yeah, let's bring you on to the next question. So it's, how quickly should I increase the weight I lift? Now, for anyone who's watched these, and I've already said it in the last one, we want to increase the weight to the point you reach a muscle fatigue. Now, that's all well and good for some people. You can quite quickly get to that point, and then you can start building from there. And the rate doesn't matter quite so much in these cases, but you still want to take it relatively slow. And I normally say if you can reach muscle fatigue at 15 repetitions to get confidence first, and then you're going to try and increase the weight over time to reach muscle fatigue at 5 repetitions, that's where you're really going to get a lot stronger than if you just keep at 15. But you're going to take at least 12 weeks to get there to try and reduce the risk of any kind of niggles creeping up or any small injuries. And you give your body plenty of time to adapt. Now, there's a lot of people that are starting that have already got an existing complaint in their knee or their hip or their shoulder, and they're worried that by lifting weights, you're going to increase or flare it up and cause it to become symptomatic again. So we need to be a bit more careful in that sense. And then that becomes very unique to each person on how quickly we do want to progress. But I want to introduce a concept of load tolerance, and I have written a post on it. So I'll find it afterwards, and I'll put the description link below, or in the description below. But basically, I'll use the example of a runner because it's a bit easier to understand the concept in terms of the distances here, and then I'll kind of extrapolate that to strength training afterwards. And I was trying to explain this to someone yesterday who had knee pain, so we'll use a knee as an example. Is if someone comes to see me and they run 5 kilometers 3 times every week, every time they take a step when they're running, there's an impact that comes back through the floor, and the soft tissues around their knee, as well as the joint surfaces, the bones and everything else, they're all exposed to a certain amount of stress or force. So in this runner that hasn't had a problem, we know that 5 kilometers is a peak of what they can tolerate. So that's up here, that we know they can tolerate this much. When they're walking around day to day, the stress and force they put through their knee is far lower than what we know it can tolerate. So it's not a problem, it's not symptomatic, it's not painful. As we start to run a bit higher, a bit further, and we get up to the 5k, as long as we're level with the line or below it, again, it's not symptomatic, it's not a problem. Now, the good news is there's a little bit of a window here that actually, if we start to run and we just do a little bit further, then our knee and the rest of our body and our cardiovascular system, they know they can adapt positively. So every time we push above it slightly, it adapts positively, and we can go a bit further. And that's why people can run a half marathon, is because over time they keep just gradually increasing the distance they do and the pace they do it at in terms of being able to get up to a half marathon successfully. I see a lot of people that fall behind on training. They suddenly try and catch up and jump up here, and they've missed this window and they've come up here, and they've not necessarily damaged anything, but they may have caused a reaction, and a sort of sensitive, angry reaction, which means what they can tolerate is a bit further down again now. And even if they jump back at 5k, it's still too much, so they get another reaction and it dips down again here. So what they do is they rest it for a long period of time, which is fine. And initially, whilst it's all calming down, they tolerate a little bit more, but it's not quite where it was. So again, even if they jump back in at 5k, despite the fact they felt good when they've just been walking around for the last few weeks, it might be too much and cause another reaction. So, and it's the same way as someone who ran a half marathon but just went back to running 5 kilometers again. They can't necessarily do it a year later, because whilst they're not using the top end, we kind of lose it down here. So what we want to do with, say, a runner that's wanting to get back from running, be able to say 2k back up to their usual 5k, is find out where they kind of are. And so they might run a kilometre to start with. If that went well, okay, that's given them the green light and qualifies them to try and do a little bit more. If that goes well, a little bit more, okay, that was a bit of a challenge, right, we've got it right now. And then you can keep nudging up over time and get them back to what they're usually doing, and potentially even further. So where this comes in with weight training is if you're particularly worried about your knee or your hip or your shoulder, and you're worried about that flaring up, and you're not even getting close to the point of muscle fatigue yet, we need to get the joint to learn to tolerate the stresses before we then worry about reaching muscle fatigue. So if you're here, we might start with a certain weight that you use, and if you know in the past that you've done up here and it's flared your knee up, right, let's start with half the weight that you use. Okay, if that went well, let's next time add maybe 1 kilogram or 2 kilograms. If that went well, add a bit more, and then we can keep nudging up. It might be the weight's not so much the issue, it might be the depth of the squats the issue. So again, you might go down to a shallower surface to start with, and then as you go deeper, it's starting to come up here. But weight's the easiest way to manipulate it. But yeah, what you want to do is every time you go to the gym, you're testing out, say if it is the knee, we're testing the knee out by asking it to do what we've asked it to do. And if it went well, then we can add to it. And then if that went well, then we can add to it. And then if you have a reaction, then we come back down again. And then you build from that point. And then you might have to have a couple of dips in there on the way up. And I always say the stock market charts might be a positive trend, but it's never a continuous straight line. It's always kind of a jagged line on its way up. And I would always say, yeah, you do the workout, see what the reaction like is at the time, see what the reaction is like over the next 24 to 48 hours. If there's been no reaction at all, that's where we build it the next time. You might not want to do it the very next day, or you don't want to do it necessarily every set you increase, because some people do get a bit of a delayed reaction. But yeah, if you're worried about pain, I'd much rather you take a very slow approach to this, because I would always much rather someone come in here and test it and feel frustrated that they could have done more, so they know next time they can do a bit more. And they might have a few sessions where they feel frustrated and then find, right, now I'm about the right level, and keep pushing up, rather than go, let's go too adventurous, try here, no, that really flared things up, I'm gonna have to wait a few days, maybe even a week to let things settle, let's try again, no, that's still too much. So yeah, trying to be too adventurous too quick when you're worried about joint pain is likely to cause frustration and you giving up with the whole process. Whereas being conservatively and gradually building, whilst it might be a little bit frustrating in the early stages, every time you add some weight, it's quite a positive change. You feel a bit more motivated to add a bit more, and then it's a much easier way to continue into the long term than it is if you're kind of trying to make sort of too big a jumps too quick. So yeah, I realise it's not a definitive answer on it has to be this percentage gain in this number of weeks. It is very individual, depending on if you've got an injury or something you're worried about. If you haven't got an injury, again, you still want to go a little bit slower, because if you're starting as an older adult, you're not going to be able to respond quite in the same way as a 20 or 30 year old might be able to. So I'd rather you give yourself more time and know that you've got the goal of progressing and know how to progress, than to rush through it and find that you just, let's say, give up with it all. So hopefully that's kind of helped a little bit with you there. Again, I do have time if you want to ask a question. So if you're watching live, then please use this opportunity. And if you are watching the recording, please do use the comments feature. I will check the comments each week and come back and answer any questions that come up. And again, next week should be absolutely fine for 12 o'clock on Wednesday. As we move into the summer holidays, I might have to do a couple of the sessions in the evening rather than at midday, but I will keep you informed on via email. If you're not already on my email list, then easiest way to get on there is to download the ebook, and then you'll automatically be on the email list. But again, if you're interested in learning more about strength training, it's nevertooltolift.com/start-here. Let's just hide that because we've got a question that's just come in from Maggie. So Maggie says, question, how do you know when to stop progressive overload? Obviously it can't continue forever. Is there a rule of thumb, sort of guideline, such as twice, thrice body weight? I can't actually see because there's a timestamp there. I think it's when is it okay for me to plateau, or when is it okay to plateau? So yeah, like you say, it's not going to continuously improve to, or it depends on what time you want to continue to improve. For me, my general rule of thumb is that I think everybody should have or has the potential to be able to lift their body weight again. So if you're doing a deadlift or a squat and you weigh 60 kilograms, you should be able to do a deadlift with 60 kilograms on the bar, or a squat with 60 kilograms on your back. And if we can get that to 1.5 times your body weight, that's even better. But that's, for someone completely new watching this isn't going to be a sudden jump to that. That is going to be over a long period of time. For some people, that might be as long as sort of 6 months, even a year. Particularly if we've got the joint or knee pain to worry about. What I tend to worry about, what I would say is, because you talked about maybe twice body weight, 3 times body weight, there comes a point where, in terms of building strength for function and having an active future, is if you've got to 1 to 1.5 times your body weight on the bar, how much extra benefit do we get versus the risk of that much weight on your back if you were to kind of stumble as you were trying to put the weight back on the rack, and the injury that could potentially cause. So I don't tend to work too far beyond 1 to 1.5 times body weight with anyone I work with. But what I do start to do is every quarter, with the people I see in the clinic, I change the exercise program we're doing. So I'll keep one program that we do, maybe 1 to 2 alternating workouts each week for 12 weeks. And in that time, I start with them at 15 repetitions, and I build and gradually increase the weight they use to find fatigue at 5 repetitions. If anyone's really experienced, I might do a little bit lower than 5 repetitions, but yeah, it's kind of that pattern. And then once we hit that, what I then do with my clients is just change the workouts. We do completely new exercises so that we then build it back up again from there with those new exercises from 15 reps to 5 reps. And then after that, we then do it again. So the other option is you can keep the exercises the same, and you can build from 15 to 5. And then once you get to 5, you can then actually then start to slightly reduce the weight down and go back out to 15 and do that maybe over a 6-month period. And then you might change the exercises and do it that way. And that's where I would kind of go with that. But I think it's always good to, with the exercise you're doing, to try and find some level of progressive overload. But as you progress, the start of it, you tend to get quite, initially quite quick gains, because the most of the benefit and the increased strength comes from you working out the best neural pathways between your brain and your muscles. So your brain's working out the most efficient way to use the strength you've already got. And then you hit what people call the plateau, where it really slows down, and that's where you're waiting for the muscles to really kind of build in size and strength. And that takes a lot longer. And the longer you go on, you'll probably see the gains slow down, which is why for me it's quite nice to change the exercises every 3 months, 6 months, because you get to start again with a new exercise at 15 and see the weights increase again. Because if you're just doing the same thing for 5 years continuously every week, it's just such a slow, demoralising process, and not seeing the weights really go up at the rate you'd like them to. So that's what I tend to do with people. So hopefully that helps you there. Again, sort of mentioned the ebook there. The other thing that people might be interested in, let me just take that away. I've also got an online course that goes through the same theory as the ebook, but in a more interactive way. So that might be of interest to people. So if that is, it's nevertooldtolift.com/course. And then the last thing you might be interested in is I've got a few t-shirts. You can make a bit of a statement in the gym, let everyone know you're never too old to lift. So I've got hoodies, t-shirts, water bottles, etc. So that's nevertooldtolift.store, and you can find those there. But for now, I think that is everything. So again, if you are watching the recording, please do use the comments to ask a question, or alternatively you can send me an email. So it's chris@nevertooldtolift.com. So that's chris@nevertooldtolift.com. And you can send me an email, and I'll keep those anonymous as I bring the questions up. But have a great week, and I'll be back at 12 o'clock next Wednesday. Thank you.